I'm going to tell you this morning about Brussels sprouts. I don't know about you, but when growing up, particularly going to a boys' public school, boarding school, there was cooking in those days was, I don't know, it didn't have the focus that it now does. And cooking for boys in a public school, which wasn't like a major league public school, it was kind of meant to prepare you for the worst sort of life imaginable, and where food should never be idolized. And they did a great thing of dethroning food. They completely annihilated food whenever they had the opportunity. Brussels sprouts were a case in point. If you had to, if we were having Brussels sprouts, they were almost, I mean, there was a skill in this. They were almost like soup, just as in have a ladle of Brussels sprouts. It was kind of like that, but not like, actually you could just discern that these things were globular. You could just see that they did have an individual identity, but as soon as a utensil touched them, they just sort of merged into mush. But even at home, it seemed that Brussels sprouts got a rough treatment, and Brussels sprouts were just mush. You'd bite into it, and you'd be biting into nothing. It was just like a green slime. So for me, Brussels sprouts were bad news. My experience of Brussels sprouts was it was always horrible. And if you just arrived and all you've heard me talking about is green slimy Brussels sprouts, there is a point to this, is that there was a revelation that happened to me in later life, and it was after marriage, actually, I think, that this revelation happened, where Kath produced Brussels sprouts for our Christmas. I thought, well, I'll eat them once a year because you have to, kind of. But she produced these Brussels sprouts, and not only were they tasty, not only did they have a firmness to them, they had been like individually and beautifully and lovingly cooked, but she'd also done this thing, I seem to remember one year, and it just kind of blew my mind, is before they ended up on the table, they ended up in a frying pan with some butter and some toasted almonds. And then this combination was on the plate. And on that particular Christmas, I remember thinking, not I've got to have a couple of Brussels sprouts because you have to and it's polite and all of that, which is what my school had set me up to do. I could eat anything. But it was, oh, can I have some more of those Brussels sprouts? This was a sentence which I never thought I would ever speak in my life. But I'd got Brussels sprouts all wrong. I'd been misled. And Brussels sprouts were so much better than I thought they were. So just bear that in mind, because we're going somewhere which may include an old version of Brussels sprouts for you. So we're in Colossians, and the title in the NIV is Rules for Christian Households. Now, this obviously has the forerunner. If you're joining us for the first time now, I'd really encourage you to look back through previous episodes. I won't do a previously on Colossians, but here we are. Paul gets to this point where he's talking about how the Colossians are therefore meant to live. And he goes with this: wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives. Don't be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. And fathers, do not embitter your children, as they will become discouraged. He then goes on, and this is where you'll get to tomorrow. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. And I don't know about you, but to a modern sensibility, and perhaps anything since the 1950s, this is evidence, if you like it, of the complete irrelevance and wrong-headedness of anything to do with Christianity that can give birth to something as monstrous as this. It is truly an old style, a Brussels sprout of a scripture. This is the sort of thing that if you ever gave someone a New Testament to read, you'd kind of hope they wouldn't come back having picked this one up and ringed it and underlined it and said, what do you mean? Tell me about this. You can't believe this. You can't do this. Because here is the patriarchy writ large, endorsed by the Bible. Look, it even permits, it endorses, it allows, it promotes slavery. It promotes a sort of paternalistic, literally a paternalistic way of seeing human relationships. It is implicitly awful. Now, that may not be your experience of it, or it might be, depending on what you saw as you perhaps grew up in a Christian household, or as you've been exposed to Christian households where something of this is being worked out. But I do want to talk to this because this is a Brussels sprout in its true form, where actually if you understand it as to what's going on with it, then there is something so much better on offer than the sort of hatchet job that I've just given you as the way that this might be seen or understood. And the first thing that you'll notice here is I've dropped off slaves because they're going to be picked up tomorrow, but they were all bracketed together. And I've underlined in the first line, as is fitting in the Lord. There is a good way and there is a bad way of looking to do something like this. And let's just put in the forefront of our mind that our Creator has given us something that is good for our benefit, for all of us. Next I'm going to say, and it's the three sort of points towards the bottom there, as I said right at the beginning, the letters to Colossae and to Ephesus are very, very closely connected. You will see a lot of overlap between them. And in Ephesians, you've got a far bigger treatment of exactly this same material. It's kind of given its big picture look. And if you want to go look at that, I'm sure if this is an area of struggle for you, it might still cause hackles to rise, but it will actually give you much more of the breadth of what this is about, where this fits in, how this works, why it is good. And to say that, and this is the second point on there, and to say that the Ephesians passage is, even that is prefaced by this thing of submit to one another out of reverence to Christ, and then goes on to explain what that looks like through the following three pairings as it gives it: wives and husbands, children and fathers, and slaves and masters. And you will see some Christians just looking to segue out of the slaves and masters thing by just saying, oh, this applies in modern day to work. Well, yeah, sure, but you can't just segue out of slavery as simply as that, and that's for another day. And then the big thing, if you like, the big takeaway here is our lens is not to be a human one on a human level primarily, even though this is where the practical application immediately comes to. Our lens is what is going on in the revelation of who God is, and therefore us as his image bearers, how we work this out in our relationships as we live. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what I want to say to you is that within the Godhead, in the relationship within the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, co-equal, and yet there is submissiveness worked out. Equality and submission are not opposites. They can nest together. They do so in the person and in the character of God. They can be, when demonstrated well, be illustrated by Christian living, Christian relationships, Christian families, the way that Christians live out their human relationships. There is one sort of question which may jump to your mind, particularly if you're a single woman. Single women are not subject to men of any sort, any men, anywhere, because you're not married to them. So this is not a command that says that all women are subject to all men. It's just not that. It's saying, though, that in relationships within a marriage where that's worked out, then submission, you could take the view that that could also be worked around words like trust. And its correlate for the husband, which is to love, and in Ephesians, to love in the same way that Jesus loved the church, to lay down as he laid down his life for her, the church. So in marriage, love is the primary characteristic which is meant to be portrayed within a Christian husband, which ought to make trust a natural and an easy response. Now, this is much more than you can really unpack fully and unpack well in a 15-minute devotional this morning. But here is where I want to leave us before we go into prayer. And we're going to go into prayer in the next sort of 30 seconds or so. So let's have the rooms, please. Here, I'd love us to go into prayer, praying for our witness in the world. In days where perhaps people are again thinking, is this life all there is? You know, if our nation can be shaken, if the world can be shaken by something as small as a microbe, you know, what is certain? What endures? Is there a God out there? Does it make sense? Well, it might look like this Brussels sprout is one of the places where people would look at Christianity and dismiss it. But what I want to say to you is, if we cook it in the way that was fitting in the Lord, then actually people might look at this and say, hey, there is something there which is beautiful. It kind of goes against my natural inclinations, but it really seems to work. Let's pray for our witness. Let's pray for our relationships within the family and within the family of the church, which works its way out differently there, but definitely is submissiveness to one another.